Greetings, everyone. I'm Simone Sanders Townsend, continuing breaking coverage of tonight's heated race for a state Supreme Court seat in Wisconsin. Normally, you would see Rachel at this time of the night, and don't worry, you will see her in a moment, because later this hour, we will bring you Rachel's interview with Senator Cory Booker, fresh off his historic 25-hour speech in the United States Senate. Historic. But first, right now, NBC News projects the liberal candidate, Susan Crawford, has defeated the conservative candidate. That means liberals will retain a narrow majority on the court. Because it's an off year, this race has taken on national significance. President Trump and especially Elon Musk have taken big roles in supporting the Republican, with Musk literally spending millions to oppose Crawford. So, folks, with that, we have a leadoff panel. Let's bring them in. Charlie Sykes, MSNBC columnist and political analyst. John Nichols, national affairs correspondent for The Nation. And Wisconsin State Representative and Minority Leader Greta Neubauer. I will note everyone here has Wisconsin significance. Minority Leader Neubauer, I want to start with you, your reaction to what we are seeing tonight. And if you could just take us into some of the efforts that Democrats employed on the ground to get what is historic turnout it's looking like for this race.
Well, we are celebrating in Wisconsin tonight. This is a very clear rebuke of Donald Trump and Elon Musk. We all have been knocking on doors, talking to our neighbors, and what we heard very clearly was that the people of Wisconsin cannot be bought, and that Brad Schimmel's bad record could not be erased, even with millions and millions of dollars spent by Elon Musk. The people of Wisconsin want a justice who is fair and impartial and going to protect their rights and freedoms, and that's who they are getting in Susan Crawford.
I want to play for everyone Susan Crawford on Musk, because he was very invested in this race. He spent nearly $20 million. This is what she had to say about him.
I got to tell you, as a little girl growing up in Chippewa Falls, I never could have imagined that I'd be taking on the richest man in the world. For justice in Wisconsin, and we won.
John, you are very familiar with Wisconsin politics. Your thoughts on the fact that this race really became Susan Crawford versus Elon Musk and his money?
Yeah, she actually framed it as such in her victory speech, which I think was precisely right. Look, here's what happened in Wisconsin. We had a high-stakes Supreme Court race to begin with. This was a race for control of a very powerful high court. If Crawford won, it was going to be a progressive majority. If her opponent, Brad Schimmel, won, it was going to be a conservative majority. So it was a big deal anyway. But then Elon Musk came in, and I think one of the things that's really important to understand here is that Elon Musk knew nothing about Wisconsin. And so he told people to vote for the Republican, even though it was a nonpartisan race. He got a lot of other things wrong. And then he flew in on Sunday and put a cheese head on his head and came out and started jumping around the stage. I think that a tremendous number of Wisconsinites saw that as not only absurd, but insulting. And Susan Crawford, who is a first-time statewide candidate, recognize that. She didn't run away from it. She didn't get overwhelmed by all the money. She spoke to it in very blunt and very effective ways. And in some ways, she may have opened up the race at a fundamental level in the debate she had with Brad Schimmel a few weeks ago. At one point, she turned to her opponent, Brad Schimmel, and referred to him as Elon Schimmel. At that point, it was pretty much over.
You know, Charlie, to build on what John is saying, the Democratic Party in Wisconsin was literally running ads that called Brad Schimmel knee pad Brad and said that he had knee pads for Elon Musk. And when John says that, you know, Musk really didn't understand Wisconsin, In the last 3 presidential elections, Wisconsin has been a state that was decided by a point or less than a point. It's historically always close. Voters in Wisconsin, they make up their own decisions. They want people to come in and earn their vote in various spaces and places. Dane County is different than other parts of the state. I'm just wondering, what do you think this means? Because I don't want people to take it. I really feel like folks could put too much on this race, because had Elon Musk won, had he been successful in the money that he spent with Brad Schwimmel, I think a lot of people would be talking about, look at Elon Musk's power here. And I would have thought that was overblown. So I don't want to blow this out of the water here in this particular sense, but I do think it is significant what has happened in Wisconsin.
Oh, I think people should blow this out of proportion here. I mean, this is a really big deal. This is a humiliation for Elon Musk. I mean, Elon Musk parachuted in Wisconsin because he wanted to be the biggest stick on the block, right? He wanted to be the enforcer and the kingmaker of the Republican Party, and to assert his clout nationwide. And he was absolutely wrecked here. Look, this is a very, very closely divided state. He comes in here, he spends $26 million, and his candidate doesn't just lose, he gets blown out. I mean, this is not the normal kind of result we have from Wisconsin. So this race turned into a referendum on Elon Musk, and he turned it into a referendum on Donald Trump. And I think that's going to have a lot of reverberations in Washington. I think a lot of Republicans in Washington really have to be asking themselves tonight and tomorrow morning whether or not Elon Musk is an asset or whether he's become a toxic boat anchor on the Republican Party. Because this is a very, very big deal, because this was a big turnout election. I mean, some numbers, the last time we had a Supreme Court election, there were about 1.8 million votes cast. There were 3.3 million votes cast in the presidential election. It looks like something like 2.4 million votes were cast in an off-year judicial election in Wisconsin. People turned out in extraordinary numbers to render a verdict on the first 70 days of the Trump administration, and that's because Elon Musk made it into that kind of a referendum. So I think this is going to have tremendous national reverberations, and frankly, any Republican in a swing district or in a state that is purple needs to look very closely at what just happened in Milwaukee. Elon Musk cannot deliver. Elon Musk's money cannot determine the fate of American politics. And I think this is a rather dramatic speed bump for the Trump administration in its first several months.
Well, you know what? I'm always happy to be corrected by Charlie Sykes. We are going to blow it out of the water. Greta, as Charlie was speaking, I saw you nodding your head. You know, every time I think about Wisconsin, I think about North Carolina and what Republicans in North Carolina and the state legislature attempted to do, and frankly did do, to then Governor Roy Cooper. And it was attempted in Wisconsin as well. Again, Republican state legislators tried to literally kneecap the governor's power. What does this win tonight mean? Because the state Supreme Court, as of March 14th, had pending cases concerning abortion rights, voting rights, and redistricting. Where do Democrats in the state go next?
Well, as Charlie said, I think we all saw tonight that Elon Musk can't save you. And that's going to be true in Wisconsin in the years ahead. That's going to be true across the country. Voters will hold Republicans responsible for bad policy. And we are seeing here at the state level, Republicans emulate Donald Trump and congressional Republicans at every turn. And that's just not what the people of Wisconsin are asking us for. They want us to invest in education. They want us to lower costs. They don't want us to focus on culture wars. And so I think this will be a wake-up call for Republicans in Wisconsin as well. I hope that they will change their tune and work with us on behalf of our shared constituents. But we, of course, are going to be looking to the years ahead. We have an opportunity for a Democratic trifecta in Wisconsin next year, and we are going to be preparing for that from every minute now until November.
They are preparing every minute. You know, John, there was something else that happened tonight in Wisconsin. While this huge Supreme Court race was on the ballot, there were other races on the ballot in Wisconsin. And then there was a ballot measure on voter ID specifically. They headed to the polls in Wisconsin to weigh in on a measure that would constitutionally enshrine a requirement for photo ID in order to vote. Over 1.3 million people voted yes on that. I've had a lot of people say, how is it possible that they elect Susan Crawford in Wisconsin on the same night that people vote yes for this amendment? And I have my thoughts, but I want to know yours.
It's pretty easy to explain. I went to vote today on the east side of Madison at the school my daughter went to, and I showed my photo ID when I voted. We have a law in Wisconsin that requires you to show an ID when you go vote. It has been the policy for a very long time in Wisconsin. The Republicans were doing a gimmick here with the constitutional amendment. They put something that is already the law on the ballot, and they tried to suggest that somehow this is an issue in Wisconsin. No matter what you think about photo IDs and all of these other issues, the reality is that I didn't hear anyone, saying, oh, wow, that's going to change things if that amendment gets passed, right? I mean, maybe Elon Musk thought it would, but he's not from Wisconsin. The fact of the matter is that Wisconsinites were focused on two races in Wisconsin. They were focused on the race for Supreme Court, and they were focused on the race for State Superintendent of Public Instruction. In both of those races, the candidates backed by progressives, backed by unions, backed by civil rights groups, backed by the Democratic Party, even though they were nonpartisan races, the candidates won. Crawford won by an even wider margin than Jill Underly in the race for Superintendent of Public Instruction. But the bottom line is that the progressive candidates won these statewide races. And I'll emphasize, they won in urban and in, not so urban areas. The numbers in some of the suburban counties where Charlie, my friend, was once a very popular conservative talk radio host, and he knows those counties very well. The Susan Crawford and Jill Underly ran better than progressives have in those areas for a long time. Didn't necessarily win them, but ran very well. And also, I always, at the start of an election night, I start to look at results from Western Wisconsin, which is, kind of a real battleground. It tends to go back and forth. Crawford and Underly were running great in Western Wisconsin counties. So bottom line here is, yes, there was a referendum on an amendment to, enshrine a law that's already on the books. But the thing that mattered was the race for who will interpret the laws of Wisconsin on the Supreme Court. And in that race, Wisconsinites chose the progressive candidate.
And we will leave it there. This was an excellent panel. Thank you all for staying up late with us tonight. Charlie, John, Representative Neubauer, thank you all very much. When we come back, folks, we are on the ground in Wisconsin after Susan Crawford's very big win. Shaq Brewster will join us after the break. I want to bring in NBC's Shaquille Brewster, who is live in Madison, Wisconsin tonight, where Democrat Susan Crawford gave her victory speech after winning the state Supreme Court race. Now, Shaq, the room was full, okay, a couple hours ago, but the race was called a little earlier, so folks went home. Talk to us about what it was like in there. This was a really important race. Democrats flipped a seat on the state Supreme Court in 2023. This was the opportunity for Republicans to flip it back. Talk to us about what you heard.
Yeah, Simone, definitely a much earlier night than many of us expected, especially in the state of Wisconsin, which is used to these razor-tight election margins. And you see the room is empty behind me. That's not because no one was here. That's because things wrapped up several hours ago. We saw Susan Crawford on stage with that newly cemented liberal majority on that Supreme Court. 4 justices who are each backed by the Democratic Party here in this state. And really, she said that justice is not for sale in the state of Wisconsin. And what she did there on her speech was reflected what you saw and heard from her on the campaign trail, where she saw Elon Musk essentially as her main opponent in this campaign. Musk central to this race, not just because of the spending that he was doing, but also because of his direct involvement. Coming to the state of Wisconsin, you see some of that video on the side of the screen right there, and saying that the fate of humanity, in his words, was on the line in this election. and trying to do what he can to boost turnout from Republican voters. But tonight you have Democrats in this state saying that voters here in Wisconsin pushed back on what they were seeing from Elon Musk. They pushed back on what they're seeing out of Washington, D.C. with President Trump, and you're hearing them celebrate the election results that we see here in Wisconsin. I should also mention that we did hear from the conservative candidate in this campaign, Brad Schimmel. He's conceded the election. He called his opponent to concede, and when some members of the crowd said no, 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 he pushed back and said these are election results that we should accept.
Very important and unfortunately significant in these crazy times. Shaq, thank you. Get some rest. When we come back, folks, Rachel Maddow's conversation with New Jersey Senator Cory Booker after his record-breaking and soul-stirring speech on the Senate floor. Don't you go anywhere.
My promise to Wisconsin is clear. I will be a fair, impartial, and common sense justice on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. Wisconsins stood up and said loudly that justice does not have a price. Our courts are not for sale.
That was Wisconsin Supreme Court Justice-elect Susan Crawford telling supporters in her victory speech last night that the courts are not for sale. After Elon Musk spent millions in that race, the question is, are we now seeing cracks in Musk's ability to influence down-ballot elections? And might he be an anchor that drags down Republicans in future ones? Plus, hours from now, President Trump will announce his so-called Liberation Day tariffs. The question is, which countries will be impacted, and will his remarks only further escalate this trade war? Also ahead, you've got mail. We're now learning that National Security Advisor Mike Waltz and other senior national security officials used their personal Gmail accounts to discuss sensitive information. The question is, how will Trump react to this latest blunder as Waltz tries to manage his way out of the Signal group chat fallout? It's way too early for this. Good morning and welcome to Way Too Early, the show that still needs to file taxes before it's too late. Take that as a public service announcement if that applies to you too. I'm Ali Vitale on this Wednesday, April 2nd, and we'll start with the news. In a blow to President Trump and billionaire ally Elon Musk, the Democratic candidate for Wisconsin Supreme Court, Susan Crawford, has defeated her conservative challenger, allowing liberals to maintain a narrow majority on the battleground state's highest court. Crawford, a circuit court judge, secured a 10-year term over conservative Brad Schimmel, who was backed by both Trump and Musk. The outcome is a major setback for Musk, who spent $25 million and personally campaigned in the state, cheese hat and all, in an effort to defeat Crawford. She spoke about her win last night.
I know how glad you are to see the TV ads end. So today, Wisconsinites fended off an unprecedented attack on our democracy. That's right. Our fair elections and our Supreme Court. And Wisconsins stood up and said loudly that justice does not have a price. Our courts are not for sale. As a little girl, growing up in Chippewa Falls, I never could have imagined that I'd be taking on the richest man in the world. For justice in Wisconsin. And we won.
Meanwhile, inside the Trump White House, advisors are brushing off the loss in Wisconsin, blaming it on an off-year election that saw lower voter turnout than the presidential race. But as Charlie Sykes reminded us yesterday, turnout was always going to be the point. The race was technically nonpartisan, but there were intense partisan overtones throughout. And this conservative loss is the first statewide test of the second Trump administration. One Trump advisor, on background notably, told NBC News the results, quote, are what they are, while another source said Elon Musk's efforts to help Republican campaigns will continue, noting Musk knew the Wisconsin race was an uphill battle. Republicans must now assess how Musk's influence will shape key political races headed into the 2026 midterms, where Republicans will defend a narrow House majority against historical headwinds. While turnout in Wisconsin did not hit presidential levels, it did come close to the number of people who voted in the 2022 midterms. Joining us now is politics reporter for Semaphore, Dave Weigel. Dave, you are the campaign king. You and I have spent a lot of time on the ground at these things. Talk about what a win for Crawford in this case means, and then we'll talk about what a loss means for Republicans.
Well, the scale of this win, it says a lot about Democratic energy right now, because before this election, Wisconsin Republicans were saying we need to turn out 60% of the voters who voted for Donald Trump. That'd be enough. And Scott Walker was saying if we had 200,000 voters from 2024 who didn't vote in the last election, 2023 for the court, we can win. And they hit those marks. They turned out 62% of the Trump vote. They got enough votes where in 2023 this would have been enough to win the race. The problem is the Democrats turned out 76%, as much as the Harris vote. They added 260-something votes. And when people were looking at these reports of high turnout, I saw Republicans saying, this is great. This means Election Day voters are coming out for us. Just tons of Election Day voters came out for the Democrat and beat their own projections. They were hoping for maybe a 5-point win. It's going to be 10 points. And that is, maybe Republicans went to bed. This election didn't determine everything. They went to bed thinking this would be a closer race than it was.
And the fact that it's not, I think, is notable in the ways that you point out, especially in a swing state, one that Trump won. I mean, all of this swirling in the pot. And then, of course, there's the Elon Musk of it all.
Yes.
What's the lesson here politically for a guy whose polling has long been bad, but now Democrats are starting to test the theory of, can he be bad in a poll and also bad on a ballot when he's affiliated with Republican candidates?
They have a good test of that now. Democrats under Ben Wickler in Wisconsin started a month ago running a People versus Musk campaign. We're going to emphasize that Musk is spending him on this race. And at that point, he'd spent, I think, $5 million or so. It ended up being more than 20. You heard it from Crawford. Their messaging was not even partisan. It was this election's not for sale. That is a message Republicans had tried to use in the state before, because they were outspent by J.B. Pritzker, George Soros, Reid Hoffman. They were getting donors from out of the state funding Democrats. They knew that was not that popular, that voters did kind of raise an eyebrow at out-of-state money. And then they embraced Elon Musk. And they had in this race, in Brad Schimmel, a candidate who didn't make the mistakes they made in the past. He'd been elected statewide before as Attorney General. He was not afraid to run with Republicans. He was independent, but he supported Donald Trump. And had started very early, started raising money and campaigning more than a year before this election. So this is not a candidate problem. This was a story of Elon Musk coming in, nationalizing it around himself, and it backfiring hugely. Democrats had thought he would motivate their voters, and they were completely right.
Yeah, and that is clearly something they're going to try to pull on going forward. Republicans do have a silver lining. Stay with us, because we're going to talk about Florida. They held on to 2 open House seats last night in special elections. As expected, these were deep red seats. NBC News projects Republican State Senator Randy Fine has won his race in the state's 6th congressional district. Fine defeated Democrat Josh Weil for the seat left vacant by President Trump's national security advisor Mike Waltz. More on him later in the show. Waltz won the same district by a 33-point margin in November, but Fine's margin was significantly less. And in Florida's 1st district, Republicans also held on to the seat left vacant by former GOP Congressman Matt Gaetz. Republican Jimmy Patronis won against Democratic candidate Gay Valmont, with the latest results showing him with a 14-point lead. Gaetz won that same district by 32 points. President Trump congratulated both Florida Republicans for their wins on social media last night. Republicans will now have a 220 to 213 majority in the House once the 2 new lawmakers are sworn in. So this is notable, but Republicans always had the edge here. How do you square the results last night with all of the griping that we started hearing last week from my sources, your sources, saying Republicans are skittish about these special elections?
Yes, it changed a lot, because a couple weeks before that, Democrats I talked to were not happy that so much money was going to Josh Weil's campaign. They said this would be better spent in Lancaster, which they won.
Millions of dollars.
$14 million in the end. And they ended up investing in this because Republicans were in their view, wasting money. Republicans rushed in money at the last minute to help Randy Fine, who Ron DeSantis spent Election Day talking about what a bad candidate he was.
Yeah.
The other race, the race in the Panhandle for the Gaetz seat, I think was more telling, because that did not attract the same sort of money, and Democrats did better comparative to the 2024 margin. And that's, not to expand the map even further, but if you look at suburban Illinois, if you look at Winnebago County, Wisconsin, where the county executive flipped, just the story was that Democrats turned out more of the voters who had come out in 2024, and Republicans in Florida have a tremendous advantage, very strong state party.
Yeah.
They won because they had so many Republicans to spare. But Democrats did a better job saying, are you angry? Are you angry at Elon Musk? Are you angry at Doge? Are you angry at the threat of Social Security? Are you angry at maybe somebody you know who's laid off from a federal workforce job? Then come out and vote. And that was effective really across the country. Small part of the country that voted last night, but across the country that all clicked.
Yeah, I do think it's really notable when you see the panhandle showing signs of change, especially an area in Florida that is so consistently conservative, consistently red, still red here, exactly as we thought it would be, but watching the ways that some of these districts and counties might be changing and maybe sustaining that. It's going to be interesting to watch over time. Dave Weigel, as always, thank you.